Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
This is just like coming home. Thank you. I was just asked a few minutes ago if I were nervous, and the answer in general is no. I've spoken publicly all my life. But always, during the 3 or 4 minutes before I have to stand up, I experience a kind of a breath-catching flash of apprehension that I refer to as stark terror. Many of you in this room, because of personal reasons, have been very kind to me, and I appreciate it far more than you know. But I will begin tonight by begging something of you. Please don't expect too much of me. Please. Sometimes the burden is almost unbearable. I would like to begin by sharing a story with you. I believe that we humans have an absolute genius for making mistakes. And I believe that most mistakes we make, most errors in judgment, are the result of ignorance rather than knowledge. It's what we don't know that causes the problem. My point is that when you make mistakes concerning alcoholics, those mistakes are always tragic, so we should try to reduce them. When I made the chalk talk for the Navy back in 1972, I began with this story. It illustrated a mistake in judgment, but the government got so absolutely paranoid about possible ethnic repercussions, they cut it out. I thought it was funny. Many mistakes are humorous. We've all made funny mistakes. They tell of a nun going to confession who tripped and fell going in. But it was so pitch dark the priest did not see that it was a nun. That was the missing fact. That was what he was ignorant of. All he heard was someone had fallen. So, of course, he was concerned. He said, "What's wrong?" And the voice said, "Excuse me, Father, I'm so nervous." He said, "Why?" She said, "My children." She taught the 2nd grade. They were driving her loony. He said, "How many children have you?" She said, 38. He said, "Get the hell out of here. I thought you were drunk when you fell in." All right? There's absolutely no harm done. It was just one of those crazy, funny things. Some mistakes are embarrassing, and of course we've all made them. They tell the story of 2 Britishers, a man and a woman, who were approaching each other on a London street, and when they got to within eye shot of each other, there was instant recognition, but the names were gone. The memories failed. So the fellow said, "Good afternoon." She said, "Hello." He said, "How are you?" She said, "Lovely." He said, "Your family?" She said, "Fine." He said, "Your sister?" She said, "Still queen." Embarrassing, but no harm done. Some mistakes are very painful, and this is the story that the government couldn't see. It seems that one afternoon, a very, very old Oriental gentleman became quite irate over the fact that someone had tossed his outhouse over the hill. He had 2 sons. One was 8 and one was 9. They were typical kids, and he called them in. He asked them point blank, "You know who threw Papa's son outhouse over hill?" And they didn't know. So he sat them down in front of him and he said, "Would like to tell you a story of American boy named George Washington, who one day chopped down Papa's son Washington cherry tree. Papa San Washington, call him in, ask him if he know about cherry tree, and Georgie said, Papa San, no can tell right. It were I who chop it down the cherry tree. Papa San Washington pat him on the head, give him cookie for to tell the truth. The 9-year-old with a big grin jumps up and makes the grand announcement. He said, Papa San, it was I who threw your outhouse over hill. And the old man nearly killed him. And when the poor little kid came to, he asked the obvious. He said, Papa San, for why you tell story of virtue get reward? George Washington tell truth get cookie, I tell truth get whipping. And the old man told him why. There only one difference. When George Washington chop it down Papa San Washington cherry tree, Papa San Washington not in cherry tree. I just have one more to tell you. Every one of us here is living proof of truth is stranger than fiction. And this story illustrates sometimes truth is a little more powerful than fiction. There's a 66-year-old woman married to a 72-year-old man. She got to feeling very poorly, and they both decided she needed a very thorough physical examination. So the family doctor went all over, and when it was all done, he had the report written. He called her and he said, Miss Smith, sit down. You're going to have to be sitting down. She kind of looked at him. He said, this will probably come as much of a surprise to you as it did to me. He said, I don't know how else to tell you except to tell you. He said, you're pregnant. And she stared at him. Not a syllable. She just stared at him. After about 3 minutes, she said, may I use the telephone? He said, certainly. She called home, and the old man answered. She said, you old goat, you went and got me pregnant. He said, with whom am I speaking? Now that the serious part is out of the way, I would like to begin. I am an alcoholic. That is the central fact of my life. My name, which most of you know, is relatively unimportant. I can legally have that changed. I can never alter the fact of my alcoholism. It is the most important fact of my life. Everything else revolves around it. And it must be that way. AA is the greatest university on earth, provided our teachers know what they're talking about. And in AA, the membership is all human. We learn from each other. I learn from you, and you learn from me, and we learn everything from each other. From the very first day we enter the doors of AA. We even, my friends, learn how to tell our stories from each other. The pattern that is set by example carries all the way through. But knowing that we are subject to error, those who founded AA wrote us a guide. It is called the Big Book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And by the way, the organization takes its name from the title of this book. The book came first, the title. In the 5th chapter, there is one line that instructs us as to how we should tell our stories. The purpose is the sharing of a life with other lives so that profit may be made by both. Our stories should disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. Don't just tell me how sick you got. Please tell me how well you're getting, because that's why I come to these rooms. If you cannot dedicate as much time to your well years as you do to your sick years, something is wrong. And so I hope to do that this evening. I will tell you enough about my drinking, what it was like, to let you know I belong here and to let me know I belong here. And I believe this. There are very few priests in this room, a handful compared to the total, so that you cannot identify with me or my drinking in that sense. But if I tell my story right, as Bill intended it to be told, every alcoholic in this room should be able to identify with me. Because if I tell my story right, it should indicate two things. When I drank, I didn't control it, it controlled me, and number two, it caused problems. The conclusion is obvious. If, like normal drinkers, I could control my intake without problems, I would probably be drinking and enjoying alcohol as so many other people do. And so I will tell you enough about my drinking to let you know that it led to those two things, a loss of control and problems resulting from it. So if any of you showed up here tonight to hear the lurid details of the drinking priest's past, you may as well go home. I just wasn't that good at being that bad. If I went into all of my drinking, it would probably put you to sleep. It did me. What is an alcoholic? Somebody whose drinking causes trouble. And there are a whole lot of tiny little questions that, if answered correctly, indicates alcoholism. I lied about my drinking. Normal drinkers don't do that. Do you know why alcoholics lie? If I were to tell you the truth about my drinking, I know that you would tell me to quit, and I know that I can't, so I lie. I have lied to a superior when I knew that he knew I was lying. The truth would not come out. It was too great a threat to my drinking. This does not happen to normal people. A lie is an unnatural act. It's the prostitution of the mind. And anything that makes us perform unnatural acts has to be serious. Question, have you ever lied about your drinking? The answer is very simple, yes or no. I hid bottles. I remember I lived in one room. It was about 10 by 13 at St. Charles College in Catonsville, Maryland. I hid a bottle one night, couldn't find it myself the next day. And that's, have you ever hidden a bottle from yourself? You know exactly where it is, and you go there, and it ain't there. You hear these bizarre stories of somebody in AA finding, after 6 years of sobriety, some bottle he hid in the fireplace. Normal people don't do this. My drinking was the subject of serious, concerned conversation on the part of people who cared about me. When one's drinking becomes the topic of conversation, that's a drinking problem. Have you and your wife or you and your husband ever sat around with 2 or 3 other couples on a Saturday afternoon at a cookout? Seriously, because you're concerned, discussing someone else's intake of sliced tomatoes? Yesterday afternoon I saw him eat 14. You see what I'm doing, don't you? I'm kicking the obvious to death. You know, one of the greatest problems that we intelligent human beings faced when we were drinking? Yeah, some clown once said, we alcoholics are a cut above average intellectually. I always said, damn, many of us got to be a brain somewhere. You know what used to stop us cold? How to get rid of empty bottles. Earth-shattering. A child would say, throw them away. Too simple. Too simple. When I was first ordained, I was sent to Mountain View, California. We were down in the Santa Clara Valley, out in the boonies, really. I had 2 suitcases in my closet, and I used them to hold empties. And when they were all filled up, I took them down to the dump to empty them out. Why didn't I throw them out one at a time? I don't know. But I was very smart. I waited till the kids were in class. I took the 2 suitcases, And to get to the dump on the property, you had to pass all the athletic facilities, go down past the ball fields, behind the barn to the dump. I waited till the kids were in class, and then I lit out. Of course, the house dress then was the long, flowing black cassock. And you know all those kids had to do was look out the classroom windows. And they would have seen me dressed in a flowing black cassock, 2 suitcases, heading into the hills. It never dawned on me. They might have thought that would be rather strange. I got down to the dump, and one at a time, I would bury these dead soldiers up on the funeral pyre, consoled by the fact that every one of those dead soldiers had a priest with him when he died. That's about the only faintly humorous part of my drinking. I didn't drink very long. It was 10 years, and the first 5 were untroubled. But I was lucky. I lived in what we call community life. We used to say that the students could hear you inhale a cigarette in your own bathroom. So it was life in a fishbowl, and thank God that it was, because my drinking was noticed very early, and something was done about it very early. I can remember being hospitalized for 3 weeks in San Francisco, St. Mary's Hospital, for drinking. I came out, started to drink. 10 days later, I was on an airplane being flown east. Ladies and gentlemen, that was in April of a school year. The significance? 3 priests had to pick up my courses and finish them. This does not happen to normal, ordinary drinkers. Never once have I been transferred the length of the United States because of string beans. Alcohol. A man gave me a magnificent definition of alcoholism. Do you want to know what an alcoholic is? Look at the major problems of your life and see if the bottle hasn't been in the picture before, during, or after. If your answer is yes, you're in. I know that there are those of you here who are on the fence and doubtful as to whether or not you have a drinking problem. Do you really want the answer to it? Do you really want to know? Ask your children. If you have got guts enough. A 12-year-old boy came to my house last summer. It was in July, on a Saturday. His aunt brought him because of the fact that his mother had a drinking problem. He's 12 years old. I brought him up to my room, and he sat about 5 feet from me on a chair, and his eyes filled up. And all he said was, "I don't want to leave my mother." And he ran over and sat in my lap and cried. And when his tears dried, I asked him one question. I said, "Jonathan, what's wrong in your house?" 5 words. "My mother drinks too much." And you could feel the ice water go through your body. That little kid knew exactly what was wrong in that house, his drinking problem. Ladies and gentlemen, from the time I arrived in the East Coast, the next 2 years were the most miserable I have ever lived. My relationship with God, I honestly believe that He did not hate me. I felt that He had just quit. He had simply given up. He had just quit. And I was alone. I was invited out of my favorite sister's house until my self-respect should return. And my friends, my family has never really seen me drunk. I have only been physically drunk about 10 times in my life. Far less than many social drinkers that I know. But alcohol nearly destroyed me. I had a superior who cared enough to come to me. He could have told me this over the phone, but he drove out to the college and made one statement. "We are sending you away this summer to get well." And 90% of my problem disappeared with that line. Many people believe you should wait for the alcoholic to ask for help. How many of you jumped out of bed on a lovely summer day and said, "Gee, it's a lovely day. I think I'll go to AA"? How many of you woke up with a hangover and rushed next door and rang the doorbell and said, "Hi there, can you help me with my drinking"? We don't do that, do we? We'd rather die first, and most do. This man cared enough to do something for me because he really did believe I was sick, and this man had no understanding of alcoholism. He simply made a statement, "We are sending you away this summer." But he came out there to assure me not to be afraid. He told me what the place was like and so forth. And I went to a place called Guest House in Lake Orion, Michigan, founded and run by laymen. And isn't it significant that Christ the priest had to have his cross carried up the hill by a layman? And isn't it almost more significant that the so-called modern priest needs the layman to save his life from this disease? I would like, if I may, this evening to share with you some convictions that I have picked up over the last 20 years. Ladies and gentlemen, please believe this, and I say it by way of preface. There are two people in my life. One is a woman, the mother of the family with whom I live, and the other is a young friend whom I have known from the day he entered AA. They love me so much that everything they say to me and for me is to make me better, and I know that. There is no such thing in either one of them as simply pointing out a fault. You did this wrong. They point out a fault and then offer a solution. And if you love me enough to do that, I'll do two things. I will thank you for it, and I will try as best I can to act on it. Please believe this, please. I love AA as much as you do. And I passionately believe in Bill Wilson's own favorite slogan, "The good is too often the enemy of the best." What's good enough is not good enough. The best. I believe that I was given the best, and I would love to pass it on. If anything I say this evening causes any pain, that is not my purpose. It is not my intent to hurt anyone. Cardinal Newman's definition of a gentleman is one who does not consciously cause pain. That is not my intent. My intent is to pass on to you what I passionately believe to be truth. And my only motive is that it offer to you the best to shoot for. Conviction number one, the absolute necessity of having a good sponsor. Ladies and gentlemen, when we drank alone. Whoever said that an alcoholic is alone in a crowd only came close. We were alone. We functioned alone because we couldn't do otherwise, and I have had enough of that. No one is judge in his own case. My friends, if I could handle me, I wouldn't need you. And if you could handle yourself, you wouldn't need me, and I wouldn't have much of a purpose in life, would I? That's the way the good God built us. The first lesson that AA teaches is a sweet dependence on each other. I do need you. And if you don't have a sponsor, I humbly submit that you are already in trouble. I'm not talking about drinking. I am simply saying you are in trouble. It was not the 12 steps of AA printed on a sheet of paper that saved my life. Someone could have mailed me the big book. I could have read it and died drunk. It was a man. It was the 12 steps carved in his life that made me want what he had. AA teaches us never ever to place personalities before principles, but it doesn't say that we should place principles instead of personalities. Principles only exist in people. Austin Ripley was his name, and it was Rip who saved my life. I wasn't in his presence 10 minutes. I arrived at Guest House on a Sunday afternoon, June 15th, 1958. And I wasn't in his presence 10 minutes, and I wanted to be exactly like him. I wanted everything he had. And for those two reasons, I would have died to please him. Had he told me that for the first month I had to sleep on the floor, I would have done it without question. I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I would have simply done what he told me to do because I knew that this man had the answers. And if you don't have anybody in your life like that, find one. Let me share this with you before I forget. I believe that the depth and the seriousness with which we work the program of therapy offered to us by AA depends directly upon the depth and the seriousness with which we accept step one. That's the base of the pyramid of the rest of our lives. Step one. I am an alcoholic. I have never seen any of you take a drink. I take your word for it when you tell me you are. I know one fact infallibly. I am an alcoholic. Step one, give in or you'll cave in. It's that simple. Step one to me is not something I take and then go on. Step one is a realization, an awareness, an admission, and an acceptance of my condition. My body cannot handle alcohol. And it is something that deepens in me every day. It's an awareness that deepens. It's a fact that is preeminent in my mind when I am awake. On this fact, and on the depth with which I accept it, depends everything that I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I am afraid of alcohol. I do not respect it, as perhaps some of you do. To me, respect means to look up to. I respect people, I respect principles, but I cannot respect an inanimate object that nearly killed me. I am afraid of alcohol. Oh, it isn't a cringing fear, but I hope to God that I go to my grave fearing that drinking alcohol will kill me, because the day I lose that fear, I'm going to try to drink it. That is a fact of my life. Now, that's a kind of a negative thing to admit a weakness. By the way, it is not weak to admit a weakness. A moron knows how strong he is. All he has to do is keep hitting trees with his fist to see if he can knock it over. And when he knocks it over, he knows he's that strong. A mature person knows how weak he is. The moron knows how strong he is. If I know my weakness and live accordingly, I can live a long life. I can't handle alcohol. That's my weakness. And everything else revolves around that fact. Everything I do. Now, with that in mind, I have to go on from there. Rip taught us many wonderful lessons about alcoholism and about sobriety. And the very first thing he ever said to me, I wasn't seated more than a minute, he says, "Hey, Father, I know about your degrees and your brains and so on." He said, "They didn't work, did they?" I said, "No," having had my last drink the day before. He said, "Leave your brains right outside the door. You do not need brains to get sober. You need desire. You don't need brains to get over open-heart surgery. You need a surgeon who's got brains. And if you want to know what sobriety is all about, ask the man that owns one. You go to people who've got it. And in effect, I said, I want what you've got. And he said, if you want what I've got, then you do what I did. I said, what'd you do? He says, 12 simple things. He did not say how tough they were in the beginning. He just said 12 simple things. The brilliance of simplicity. You know what Bill Wilson did when he wrote the steps? Hold on to your hats. This is deep. He numbered them. You don't need a PhD to figure out that 3 goes before 4. If you're having trouble with the program, seriously, if you're having trouble with the program, when all else fails, follow directions. Just follow directions. They work. Do you know that AA is the only therapy on earth that dares to put itself in the past tense? This is not theory. By the way, if there are any intellectuals in the room, AA is not a theory. I have a theory about theories. I really do, honest to God. You know, the theory, you can teach alcoholics to drink again. I have a theory about theories. If a theory is valid, it'll work. God, don't talk to me about it, show me. You can have a theory about baking pies. You fly the most exotic ingredients from around the world. You use revereware and a microwave oven. But if the pie makes you puke, it is no good. Now, you can have all the theories you want about alcoholism and about sobriety. AA is not a theory. Two men in utter, total desperation reached out for help. They accepted everything from clergy, from medical men, from psychiatrists, etc., from the general public. They kept what worked and threw out what didn't, and so they put it in the past tense after they had done it. We have done these things, they work. Now, if there's any brilliant guy out there who wants to disprove that, do these steps and prove them wrong. But do them. Do them. Step 1, I can't handle it. Step 2, God can. Step 3, I think I'll get in touch. I walked into a room the day after I arrived at Guest House. It was in Pontiac, Michigan, and in that room were about 25 sober alcoholics. And every one of them said, I am an alcoholic, sober 22 years, 14 years, 3 years, 7 years, 9 years, on and on and on. They had admitted that the power to not drink was not in them. I said, if it isn't in you, where'd you get it? They said, outside of us. If it isn't in, it's out. And so you come to the conclusion that a power greater than self. If I'm looking at you and you're well, maybe I can get well. The beauty of AA, we can do what I can't. Example is the name of the game. A lot of people, and I have heard this before in AA, have trouble with this concept of higher power. None of us should ever have trouble with believing that there's something greater than self. If you have trouble with that concept, try mirror therapy. Buy a very cheap mirror and look at it. And if within the space of about 4 to 5 seconds you cannot come to the conclusion that somewhere, someplace, there's got to be something bigger than what you're looking at, you are in trouble. Isn't it so simple? We depend on Cronkite for the news. We depend on a store to eat. It's where we buy food. We depend on a kid to bring us the evening paper. It is no trouble at all to believe that there's something bigger than self. But I seriously challenge this notion on the part of some members of the fellowship who say to an already sick alcoholic, if you don't have a higher power, try that coffee cup. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't belong to Coffee Cups Anonymous. I belong to Alcoholics Anonymous. People get people sober. I would suggest that if you don't have a God, then use the strength of the group. Because if I could get sober through a coffee cup, I got one of them at home. So why come to meetings? People get people sober. People do. And it's the example of a sober alcoholic to the sick alcoholic that works. So we come to these rooms, we look at good health, and we come to believe that we can get it too. You know the beautiful thing about AA? They teach us we're sick instead of evil, and most sick people want to get well. And when somebody says, here's how, we grab. Do you want to know the magnificence of the psychology of these 12 simple statements? When the drug is removed from the person, the fear begins to subside and go away. I mean the irrational fears. Fear of the dark, fear of the phone, fear of anything and everything. Watch our approach to God. When we become isolated from God, by the way, this was the very first fact that Bill Wilson found out about alcoholism, that it was a spiritual disease. Remember, he asked Dr. Silkworth, I wonder if I might not get sober by trying to help another drunk. And he went down to the Bowery and all around and started talking to them using very sophisticated religious principles, and they weren't responding. He discovered that he was feeding spiritual steak to infants. Their drinking had messed up their relationship with God. And so he found out the very first thing you had to do to straighten somebody out was get them off the drinking. And then you patch up these other things. It's first and foremost a spiritual illness. Because when I become isolated from the God who made me, I then become isolated from self and I become isolated from others. The alcoholic is a blob of loneliness. Watch as the alcoholic is farther and farther removed from the drug, listen to the way we refer to this higher power. Step 2, power greater than ourselves. Little time goes by, God as we understand Him. Step 5, admitted to God. Step 7, humbly asked Him. The beautiful progression. Power greater than ourselves, God as we understood Him, God, and then Him. And it's the same way with everything else in life. Once we get sober, we should now, to be different from all the getting sobers in the past, stay that way this time. And so we take the rest of the steps. Now, what is going to prompt me to do all 12 steps? Ladies and gentlemen, you know what I believe? Again, another conviction. If we could get happily, effectively, and productively sober on 10 steps, that's all there'd be. These two men were not interested in writing a handbook of monasticism. They were interested in simple survival. And if they could have done it on 5, there wouldn't be 12. I do not do these steps because they're nice. I do them because they're necessary. And some wise old AA said, I don't know who coined this phrase, there are no musts in AA. He said, I counted 37 of them in the big book. Maybe there aren't any musts in AA, but there are a whole lot of you better hads. I'd like to share this with you. I picked up from a friend of mine in St. Louis. He stopped in the central office in Chicago one time, visiting there, to find out about meetings, and he said a very lovely black girl promised to take him to a meeting that night. So they met. She was very agitated. He said, what's wrong with you? She said, well, I promised to take you to a meeting tonight, but she said, I have a brand new girl I'm working with, and she wants to see me right now. And I don't know what to do. Just there's no problem, we'll go see her. So they went, and they met her in a very cheap bar on the south side of the city. The picture, this little girl is 23 years old, black, sober 3 months. Her background, her entire life, she had functioned as a whore on the street in order to survive, and she drank to do it. Her problem, she's sober now and can't stand it. But she is so afraid of God, alcoholism is a spiritual illness because it messes up our relationship with God. She was so terrified of Him, she said, there is no God, so let's hear no God talk, please. And her sponsor says, the only thing I know to talk about, it's what AA is based on. And the kid says, I don't want to hear it. And this went on and on for about an hour. And the sponsor is becoming more and more agitated, and the two of them are growing farther and farther apart. Joe just sitting there listening. But he knew that there was something in that girl that desperately wanted out. And when silence descended, Joe stepped in. And he baited her just enough to get it out. He said, why do you want out of that life? It's the only one you know. And he said, she shot right out of that chair. She said, because I'm worth too much. Now, what are you worth? Ladies and gentlemen, I know that this is a judgment, and maybe I'll be crucified for saying it, but do you know that there are all kinds of sobriety in AA? I know some sober pigs, and so do you. I'll tell you what I'm worth. I'm worth the best, and I'm going to have it. My life is well over half over. I'm 54 years old, and I don't think I'm going to be around to see 108. And for what's left, I want the best. And if you ain't got it, get out of my way so I can go to somebody that does have it. I'm worth that much. Now, what are you worth? The best is available, but it's got a price tag to it. Just like everything that God gives, it's got a little price tag to it. You know what the price tag is for the best type of sobriety? All 12 steps. We have to pay that price. I once heard that AA can be compared, or the food of AA is cafeteria style. Pick what you want. Do it and you'll get just what you pick. You know the principle I function under right, and what I'm really trying to say is, since I got sober, margarine covers the bread, but it ain't butter. And if you want butter, you pay for it. I don't know how long I can use that. They tell me margarine is quite expensive. Step 4, we took the inventory. Step 5, we made it known to God, ourselves, and somebody else. If I have to rebuild the rest of my life, I have to know what I've got, what I haven't got, and what has to go. My friends, let me share another very serious conviction with you. Every one of us has talents and gifts. God Almighty never made a nothing. Now let's get serious. Rip used to say this: treat yourself very lightly, but treat this disease with the deadly seriousness that it demands. When AA teaches us that we have to be honest with ourselves, it is not just about our drinkings with everything else. I cannot stand phony humility. If you really want to know when a person is sincere, when he knocks himself, agree with him. You know, a guy gives a talk, and you go up after and say, gee, that was a marvelous talk. It helped me immensely. Guys, oh, it wasn't too good. Pause for about 5 seconds and say, you know, on second thought, it did stink. I don't want to hear that garbage. For every alcoholic that survives and gets well, there are how many who die? 4, 25, 35? What right have we to be in this room tonight? What right have I to be sober? None! I don't know why I was picked. Why were you picked and your brother died? Why have you gotten sober and your son is still drinking? These are the mysteries of God. But boy, I know this, that I was given sobriety to fulfill my responsibilities. I better find out what I've got and use it. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe this to the marrow of my soul. Every single one of us in this room has some gift that God gave him that's going to be able to touch another human heart that nobody else is going to be able to get near. You better find out what it is. You're going to be asked to use it before you die. What I haven't got, there are a whole lot of things I haven't got. I can't throw footballs like John Unitas. I'm not too hot a singer, and I'm not 6'5". Now, I either have to accept that or go through my life envying those who do and not using the talents that I have. And the whole thing is a waste of time and energy. And what has to go? A whole lot. It is my opinion that steps 6 and 7 are the infinitely most difficult part of AA. We're entirely ready to have God remove our defects of character, and my defects have character. And then we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. To me, that's the most difficult part of all because it demands almost impossible self-discipline. And please believe this, please. Self-discipline gets more difficult as you grow older. I'd like to share this with you, if I may. Pride, I guess, is one of the greatest things that stalks us all. I don't know how you sit at discussion meetings, but this is me. Chairman comes in, boy, oh gee. You know, when the I gets back over the E, we're supposed to use it. And if you're asked to chair a meeting, that's an honor. They say in the old days, you had to be sober a year before you were asked to chair a meeting. And it absolutely kills me to hear a fellow or a gal walk into a meeting, knowing that he has had this meeting to chair for, let's say, 2 months. And he walks in and says, well, I don't have a topic picked out, let's just kick it around. I want to kick him around. You chair a meeting that I am attending, you owe me. They aren't joke sessions. We're not here to entertain each other. You remember the old Camel ad, if you want a treat instead of a treatment, smoke Camels? Maybe some of you don't remember. I was about 80 years old. But anyway, there was. I switched that slogan around to apply AA to me. I go to AA for a treatment, not a treat. Now, I would far prefer that the speaker be humorous, that he be lively, that he be personable, and so on, but that's beyond the point. That's beyond the point. We are here to share with each other to help keep each other sober. All right. So I come to a discussion meeting, and let's say the chairman is all prepared, and he says, my name is so-and-so, I'm an alcoholic. Tonight let's talk about humility. And he gives a beautiful opening paragraph so that we can peg our own thoughts on it. And then he turns to the guy on his right and he says, John, do you have any thoughts on humility? And poor old John, you know exactly what he's going to say, because he hasn't varied this little spiel one syllable for the last 28 years. My name's John, I'm an alcoholic. I had my first drink when I was 2 and a half, and I puked all over my mother, and she hit me in the mouth with a chair. And 8 minutes later, he hadn't said anything about humility. Mary, do you have any thoughts on humility? Yeah, my name's Mary. Mary, if you were married to that SOB, I'm married to. You have to... And 20 minutes later, she hadn't said anything about humility. All right, now, this is me on the other side of the table. Mentally, I'm drumming my fingers. Wait till it gets to me. I'm going to straighten this entire meeting out. Do you hear anything? It's the easiest trap for the human to fall into. All the while I'm straightening the meeting, I'm not hearing what's being said. One night I felt very strongly about what was being said, so when it came to me, I said, I'm Father Martin, I'm an alcoholic, and I pass. It was like cutting my tongue off. Well, I walked home that night with far more therapy than I could have gotten from straightening out 1,000 AA meetings. You know what I've learned from this beautiful program? If I were to die tomorrow morning, I honestly and sincerely hope to God that there would be a few tears shed. I mean that. But a week from tomorrow, I would be a memory. Only a memory. A pleasant one, I hope, but only a memory. Your lives will go on. And I have come to the conclusion that my worth on this planet is not how many meetings I straightened out with a whole lot of wise words and bizarre sayings and knocking other people. It's with how well I lived in between the meetings what I said at them. That is AA. It's called walking the walk. Ladies and gentlemen, anybody can talk the talk. An atheist can give a sermon on faith. All he's got to do is read a book. Making amends. You know how tough that is? We have to prepare for it. Made a list of people and became willing. We have to become willing for God to remove our defects of character. Hey, by the way, in the removal of defects of character, let me share this with you. Here is what I believe about God and man and their relationship. I don't believe God just makes us sober. I don't believe He just takes away our defects of character. I believe God plays a role and we play a role. God gives the strength, we do the doing. He's the divine physician. He writes the prescription, we take the medicine. And very often I honestly believe that we try to teach people that God does things that He's not about to do. You ever heard, we have marvelous slogans in AA, absolutely brilliant. And they're good, and very often in life, they're the only things we have to hang on to. Simple syllables. One of them is a little overworked. And I really believe that if you have a serious problem and you go to a sponsor for some serious advice and he throws a slogan at you, I don't know what you're going to do. A fellow walks into a meeting, he says, my wife just ran off with my best friend. 3 of my kids were picked up on drug charges. My house burned down. Somebody shot my dog. Somebody looks at him and says, easy does it. See. And the other one's the beauty. Let go and let God. And almost 100% of us haven't the foggiest idea what that means. You know what it would have sounded like to me if I walked into my first, hey, Father, you got a drinking problem? Yeah, let go and let God. I would have done just that. You know what my background is. I would have let go in the sense I would have quit and said, okay, God, it's in your hands. Make me sober. But He doesn't do that, does He? He gives us the strength to stay sober, and then He gives us the way to exercise that strength, the steps. And that's exactly the way He handles our defects of character. He gives us the power to do the job ourselves. Impatience is one of my greatest... That's why I'm not a counselor. I wouldn't make a good counselor. Impatience. I'll help you get well if you show me you already are. And you can't treat sick alcoholics that way. And so you pray for patience. And I honestly believed, dear Lord, please make me more patient, that He simply would. But He doesn't work that way. He handles my defects of character the same way He handled my alcoholism. He gives me the strength. I have to do the job. Did you ever hear a fellow walk into a meeting at night and say, holy smoke, what a day. I needed this meeting worse than anything. So I had a flat going to work. Somebody creamed my car and totaled it while I'm waiting for the tow truck. Got in there late. Boss bawled me out for missing 3 accounts, sales. Had a fight with the secretary. I was late getting home. She started yelling at me. Horrible dinner. Cut myself shaving and burned myself in the shower. Terrible day. Some old pro in the back of the room says, sounds to me like God gave you 32 chances to improve and you blew them all. That's exactly the way God works. He's just not going to remove things. Did you ever hear this one in AA? Well, I'm not tempted to drink, but I have a little living problem. I think I'd better get out of the driver's seat and let God take over. You do, you'll have a wreck. God doesn't come down and make your decision. Has God ever fried your eggs for you? Why do you presume He's going to do anything else? Do you know what God gives drivers? Maps. He doesn't drive the car, He gives us maps. But you know what we're like, you and I? Shove the map in the glove compartment and step on the gas. Hour and a half later, so how the hell did I get here? You know. My own description of the alcoholic in action. I've told this 1,000 times, but it's the only story that tells it right. An Alitalia airplane took off from LaGuardia, headed for Rome, and it's over the ocean. It's in the air about an hour when the PA system comes on. Hello, it's the DCU pilot. In a few minutes, the pretty stewardess, she's going to come and serve you lunch. Well, I hope you enjoy it. But before lunch, I've got 2 announcements. One's good news, one's bad news. I'll give you the bad news first. Announcement number 1, we're lost. There's a hold on for the good news. We're making a damn good time. That's almost a photograph of the alcoholic. He has the foggiest notion where he's going, but he's getting there quick. Notice how the steps are coming? If there are any psychologists or psychiatrists in the room, prepare and then execute. Listen to the brilliance. Listen to the brilliance of the simplicity. You want to get well? You admit you're sick. You enter a room and look, and you come to believe. You make a decision to turn your life over to God, you spend the rest of your life doing it. You take an inventory, you make it known. You become ready to have your defects removed, you ask Him to do it. You make a list and become ready, and then you make amends, etc., etc. Prepare and then execute like normal people do. Please listen to this if you listen to nothing else. Get help and advice in making amends. Please. Many people, in order to whitewash themselves, actually hurt other people. And the brilliance of AA, except when to do so would injure them or others. I've known men who have taken their 5th step to their wives and absolutely destroyed them by making known things that shouldn't be made known, just because I want to feel good. Did you ever hear this in AA? Do what makes you feel good? My God. If I did that, I'd be in jail in about 35 minutes. Continue to take inventory so that there's no possibility of a backlog of guilt and remorse. AA says nip it in the bud. Step 11 speaks of prayer. I used to spend about 20 minutes on that, trying to put a philosophical basis under prayer, showing it's the most human thing we can do. I don't do that anymore. You know why we ought to pray? Because it's only fitting. My friends, if you need anyone to explain to you why you should have a prayerful relationship with the God who gave you the precious gift of sobriety, there isn't a soul on earth can explain. Step 12 is putting one's money where one's mouth is. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, and Bill Wilson said most people's awakening is a very gradual thing. He said, look at yourself now and look at yourself in the middle of your last drunk. Do you see a difference? Yes. What explains the difference? The working of these steps. That is a spiritual awakening. We tried to carry this message to alcoholics. This afternoon, a woman told me that she had pleaded with some people in AA to 12-step her son, and they refused because he hadn't called. My big book, and this one right here, does not say we tried to carry the message to alcoholics who picked up the telephone, called the central office, and asked us to. I'm not saying you should run into bars, knocking people off of bar stools. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying in a judgmental way, many of us in this room do not believe it's a disease of body, mind, emotion, and soul. Out of this side of our mouths, we say it's such a disease, and out of this side of our mouths, we say, but I'm not going to help this sick guy until he makes a rational decision with that sick mind. What sense does it make? My God, my friends, don't you know why this room is filled tonight? Don't you know how it all started? Dr. Bob didn't call Bill. Bill called him. And I don't know what else to say. I saw a movie, Patton, 6 times. It was just on TV a couple of months ago. That was my 6th time. You remember how it opened? He had 4 stars, and he was ready to lead his army from England onto the continent. And he called his troops together the night before in an airplane hangar in England. And he began his talk with this line. He said, "No bastard ever won a war by dying for his country. We win wars by making some other poor dumb bastard die for his country." And then he gave a brilliant talk on war and bloodshed and killing and so on. And sitting in the movie for the first time, something hit me like a sledgehammer when he said that. I knew that there was something in there that applied to us alcoholics. I knew it. And after the 3rd time, I was reading the breviary, the priest's prayer book. Listen to this one line from a psalm. My neighbors stand afar off because of my affliction. My neighbors stand afar off because of my affliction. And then it hit me. You and I, we alcoholics, are the illegitimate children of the human race. And our neighbors stood afar off because of our affliction. And the next time Patton opened his mouth, this is what I heard. No alcoholic bastard ever won the war against this disease by dying. We're going to win the war, you and I, by trying to make some other poor, dumb, frustrated, miserable alcoholic live. And that is what AA is about. That's what it is all about. But it all hinges on a sense of gratitude. And gratitude is one of those things that we talk to death. If you've got to tell me you're grateful, I wonder. My friend, if you are grateful, I'll see it. You won't have to tell me. My only fear is dying not grateful enough for all the goodness God has showered on me. Gratitude is defined as the only coin with which you can buy God. He is a sucker for gratitude. If you're grateful for today's sobriety, you just paid for tomorrow's. You see, Bill Wilson dreamed the impossible dream, and he fought the unbeatable foe. He bore with unbearable sorrow and ran where the brave dared not go, but he knew if he'd only be true to his glorious quest that his heart would lie peaceful and calm when laid to his rest. And the world has been better for this. One man, scorned and covered with scars, still strove with his last ounce of courage. He reached the unreachable star, and he stood on top of the mountain, and he held within the arms of that magnificent heart of his that blinding jewel that men and women had been searching for centuries. He had it, sobriety. But in getting it, as a result of the first 11 steps, he had his free humanity restored to him. A human being free in the image of God. And he acted like God. The only thing that philosophers and theologians can say about God is goodness tends to diffuse itself. It shares. And that's exactly what he did. He shared sobriety with us. Let's not wait for people to ask for it. Let's share it. Gratitude is the golden tray on which I offer to others what God has given me. And my friends, the beauty of this strange phenomenon that we call gratitude is that we can never discharge our debts. If I could repay all of you for what you have given me, then there'd be nothing to bind us together. So that every act of kindness, every smile from your faces, every handshake, every hug, every look, is an act of love that creates another golden ring in the chain of gratitude that binds me to you. What is my life like now? After a period of depression 8 years ago in which I thought I would die, I was given permission to function professionally in alcoholism, and it was my privilege to have the Chalk Talk filmed almost accidentally by the Navy. It has bought me, thanks be to God, credibility. Wonderful things have happened to me since. Traveling all over. I spent 25 years of my life in 2 places. And now it's like a fantasy. I know that there's a lot of wealth in this room created by sobriety. But my friends, please believe this. I'm one of the wealthiest men on earth. Because God in His goodness, through AA, has given me all of you. And if true wealth is measured in terms of human friendship, I am one of the wealthiest men on earth. I wish you could be me right now. I truly wish you could see what I'm looking at. It's a wonderful thing when we enter AA to realize I need you, but it's an almost devastating realization to know that you need me. I really am important. But I want you to know that it's the likes of you that keeps the likes of me going. You know what it's like to see crystal clear eyes and happiness on human faces, and to know that even though you don't know too many of them, you know that you helped to put those looks there. In New Orleans, on a Sunday morning after an AA thing, a strikingly handsome man stood in front of me, snow-white hair, very tall, very distinguished looking. And loud enough only for me to hear, he said, "Alcohol put me in prison for 11 years. And never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would stand in front of a man, look him in the face, and tell him that I love him." But he said, "I love you." And he walked away. It is one of the greatest honors of my life to know that I have helped to contribute to the sobriety of other people. And one of the great rewards that keeps me going is to be able to have an occasion like this to meet and fall in love with so many people. Always there wells up inside of me part of a song about the sea, sung by the British singer Roger Whittaker. For you are beautiful, and I could love you dearly, more dearly than the spoken word can tell. There is a price tag on everything, and the price I pay is always having to leave people I love. I leave tomorrow. I hope to God you'll get me back one day. But I have learned from the Latins, never to say goodbye, but to commend you to God. Adios, adieu, addio. And to pray that we meet again. Peter's aim, au revoir. The Italian phrase unto the seeing again, a rivedere, has a special meaning in Rome. There is nowhere on earth where the native has a greater pride of origin than Rome, for to him the world revolves around it. And he never says, just till we meet again. He says, till we meet again here. Arrivederci. Let this be our Rome, for here is where I met you. I commend you to God. Addio. And I like to believe that the prayers that I have said for you over the past 20 years have done every bit as much good as any film I've ever made. May we meet again here. Arrivederci.